Well, you have just reviewed positive and negative reinforcement and punishment. And sometimes those negative reinforcement and negative punishments can get a little bit confusing, so I wanted to review those again really quickly. So I've got two examples of negative reinforcement. You saw that video earlier where the baby was crying for the remote control, and the mom gave the baby the remote control to stop the baby's crying. So the mom wanted that behavior to stop, and so she gave him the remote control, or you could give the baby the food that they wanted. Kids crying in the back of a car, the parent wants them to stop, so stops off at Dairy Queen. And that would stop the crying behavior, and that would be a negative reinforcement for the parent. So the parent is getting what they want, they're being reinforced. Next time they will be more likely to stop when the children are crying. And at the same time, those children are getting positively reinforced because they're doing a behavior and then they're getting rewarded for it. They're getting a reinforcement. So the negative reinforcement is when something is taken away that leads to the behavior happening more often. Something's taken away and something good happens. You could think of it that way. So in this case, the baby's crying. I, as a parent, don't want the baby to be crying anymore, so I give the baby a cookie. Not really great parenting in all cases, but that would be negative reinforcement. I'm taking away something from the situation, the crying baby, by giving it something. Alright, so another example is these collars, prod collars. I'm not sure what they're called. I don't actually have a dog, but they're an example of negative reinforcement. A dog that is calm and just fine, like these dogs over here, they've got slack in their leash, will not be harmed at all by these prongs. But these dogs over here that are pulling, as long as they're pulling on that collar, it's going to be poking them. So as the dog is doing something inappropriate, it is getting hurt, and as soon as it stops, that harm, that hurt from that collar goes away. So this can get kind of tricky because these collars could also be used as a positive punishment where you're adding something to the situation. In this kind of case, you could add to the situation by pulling back on the dog's collar, adding pain to the dog to try and get it to stop. But the intention of these devices is that they are there as a negative reinforcement. So as the dog is misbehaving, it will be hurt, and as it chooses to behave properly, then that hurt goes away. Like these dogs here, they wouldn't be hurt at all. So it can get pretty confusing. So again, negative reinforcement is when something is taken out of the situation to lead to increase of behavior. So in this case, the crying is taken out of the situation. In this case, the pain from the prods are taken out of the situation. So that's negative reinforcement. Now, negative punishment can also get a little confusing, but hopefully it's a little easier to understand. A very clear example of negative punishment is taking away privileges or things such as a Game Boy, putting a child in timeout, so taking them out of the situation or taking something that they want away from them, intending for that to be a punishment to lead to a decrease in whatever behavior they were doing. Let's say they were playing Xbox with their brother, and they started fighting over it, punching each other, so the parent takes the Xbox away. That's taking something out of the situation as a punishment, hoping that that fighting behavior will stop. And it can get kind of confusing because you might think of timeout, putting them into a timeout, as a positive punishment, and I could see how you could think that, but I think of it more as a negative punishment. You're taking them out of whatever situation they were enjoying doing, playing in the park, something like that, and they're fighting with kids in the park. And the negative punishment is taking them out of that situation that they like, taking that away from them to stop that behavior from happening. So now, positive reinforcement and positive punishment are usually what we think of when we're thinking of reinforcement and punishment, so it should be pretty good. So we've got positive reinforcement here, someone saying good job to you, coins or something in a being good jar, those are positive reinforcements. Getting a cookie for doing something good, that should be pretty clear, I hope. Now, positive punishment, while at first students tend to be confused of the wording, positive in this situation is just meaning adding to the situation. So positive is adding to the situation, negative is taking something out of the situation. So in this case, there is an addition of a spank happening here. And so that is a positive punishment, something being added to stop a behavior from happening. So hopefully that gives you a couple more examples to clear those things up for you. There's a little chart here where they use timeout as adding something unpleasant as a positive punishment. I still do think that it fits better in the negative punishment area, but a very clear example of a negative punishment is taking away something that's desired. So hopefully that clears that up a little bit for you. Now we'll talk about schedules of reinforcement. The book didn't talk a whole lot about this, but it's a very important issue in your futures. Whether you're trying to train an animal, whether you're trying to help a child learn, these kinds of schedules of reinforcement are going to be really important because reinforcement works much better than punishment, and there's certain types of reinforcement schedules that work better. So here we'll start by defining some of these terms. An interval is just talking about time, so like 5-minute interval. A ratio is talking about a number of times a behavior is performed. So this might be 7 presses on a lever in between reinforcements. So these black lines here are reinforcements. When you give the mouse its cheese. So a lever press and give the mouse its cheese, then levers being pressed, you give a mouse a cheese after, say, 5 times. Alright, so fixed, this word here, the definition for fixed is a set thing, always the same. Whether it's in an interval or a ratio, the fixed is always a set. Now, variable is just what it says, is variable. Scientists use random number generators to set the variableness. They set, well, for an interval, the first time might be 5 minutes, then 2 minutes, then 5 minutes again. It might be 7 minutes after that, in between reinforcements. So let's go through these 4 categories. Variable interval is a random time of reinforcements. So you give a mouse a reinforcement for pressing a lever, then this might be 2 minutes before giving it another reinforcement. Then your random number generator tells you, okay, this time wait 30 seconds. So as long as within that 30 seconds the mouse has pressed the lever, you'd give it another reinforcement. Then your random number generator tells you 3 minutes this time. So you give another reinforcement as long as the mouse has pressed the lever. And it doesn't have to be pressing the lever just right before, it just has to be pressing the lever sometime in that time. Alright, fixed interval is a little different. It's always a set time. So you decide this before your experiment or what you're doing, and so this might be you will reinforce the mouse every minute and a half. So a minute and a half goes by, it's been pressing the lever. A minute and a half goes by, it's been pressing the lever. And you can see the different trends that happen. When you do a variable interval, there's a more consistent increase in the behavior. When you do a fixed interval, the animal learns and realizes that the reinforcement is not going to come until about the 1 minute 30 second mark. So the behavior increases right before the reinforcement. And that's a trend seen in many different animals, even humans. All right, now we'll go over to the ratios. And these are the schedules of reinforcement that work better for continued long-lasting behavior change and learning. So a variable ratio, again, is a random number of times. So we give a rat reinforcer after it's pressed the bar 3 times. Then our random number generator says 7. So we wait till it's pressed the bar 7 times. Then it might say 2. So we give it a reinforcement after 2 presses. Then this time it says 8 times. So we let the rat press it 8 times. And this schedule, as you can see, has a sharp increase in behavior, and it's very consistently high behavior. There's no drop-offs, there's no plateaus. This tends to be the best schedule of reinforcement, is a variable number of times the behavior happens, and it also extends on. The behavior doesn't die off or become extinct as easily with a variable ratio. Now this is a fixed ratio, so your fixed number might be, say, 7 presses. So the mouse presses 7 times, you give it a reinforcement. 7 more times, it gets a reinforcement. And you can see here, it kind of plateaus because the mouse is like, well, I don't care so much, and then, oh, well, I do want that treat again, so presses again, and usually it presses really quickly. It presses a couple times really fast, and then it kind of dies off, and then presses again really fast. Oops. So that's a fixed ratio. So the same number of presses, the same number of behaviors for that. And I want to explain a little bit more about the variable ratio, because this tends to be, like I said, the most effective. And this works very well with parenting and with managing employees. Anytime you're in a kind of leadership position, a variable ratio schedule of reinforcement will do best to increase the behavior that you want and keep it lasting for a long time. So an example of this, we use the mouse, but we can use the example of a child. Obviously, you're not always watching an older child, maybe 6 or 7, but that child might have chores like cleaning its room. The child might need to sweep the kitchen floor. And so you might not, as a parent, may not see every single time the child is doing this, but when you do see it, say it's the 3rd time this week that they've done it, and now you see it, you can give them a reinforcement. You can praise them, you can give them a treat, put a star on their board, and then it might so happen that the very next day you see them doing it again, and so you give them a reinforcement. Then it might be a week or so until you see them sweeping the floor again, but when you do see and when you do notice them sweeping that floor, you should reinforce them, because this will end up becoming a variable ratio schedule. Because basically you're not going to see every single time they do most behaviors, but when you do notice them doing something positive, a behavior you want them to be doing, reinforce them for that at that point. And it will tend to turn into a variable ratio schedule. And that will increase the behavior quicker, it will make it longer lasting, and it's much more effective than using any kind of punishment for having not done the chores. So a variable ratio is fantastic to use with children, in a leadership position. If you're a manager, you have employees that are doing good work, and you notice it maybe halfway through the month, you can reinforce them, say great job, maybe give them, I don't know, whatever you could, give them a candy bar or something. And then maybe you notice it a few weeks later. It's basically whenever you notice it, try to reinforce it, and you'll end up turning it into a variable ratio schedule. So next we're going to watch a little bit longer video about crows, but it will show you some interesting behaviors that these crows will do.